So I think I want to begin this video with just a little bit of poetry. This is from William Wordsworth. This is from lines composed a few miles above Tintern Abbey, and I'm not going to read the whole poem because it's quite a long poem, but I will just try and get this last bit of the second stanza here. So, nor less I trust to them I may have owed another gift of aspect more sublime, that blessed mood in which the burthen of the mystery, in which the heavy and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened, that serene and blessed mood in which the affections gently lead us on, until the breath of this corporeal frame and even the motion of our human blood almost suspended, we are laid asleep in body and become a living soul, while with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. And I think in tandem with that, I'm going to relate an experience I had earlier today and an I Ching reading I had earlier today, which just kind of made things line up for me. It reminded me of the deep power of joy. And joy indeed has a deep power to it and is something that we should try and cultivate in life. So, what I do every now and then is I take an I Ching reading. It's like on a fortune telling website called ifate.com. I do a little I Ching reading for myself every now and then, and I always ask the same question, or I always ask it to, I say, please assess my current circumstances, or please assess my current situation, and it'll feedback whatever it feeds back, one of the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. I think it's 64 anyway, I'm not so certain. But yeah, it fed back joyousness this morning. So it reminded me of the power of joy, and it reminded me of this poem, and it reminded me of just the power that we feel when we're feeling truly joyful. And the I Ching also said, joy is not the same thing as pleasure. It's not the same thing as the pleasures and fun that we get from the consumption of, say, alcohol or drugs or anything like this. It's something very much divorced from that. It's something altogether purer and a higher form of happiness, I think. And it's something that I think we come to experience when we're deeply invested in creative work, when we're fully in the moment and appreciating nature around us. When you go on these long walks in nature, what you really want to find, long walks such as those that Wordsworth went on above Tintern Abbey, composing this beautiful poem, you do get that sense travelling through the Sylvan Wye, right, and seeing Tintern Abbey there several miles below you down in the valleys of South Wales, and you connect the landscape to the quiet of the sky, and these other things which that's another line from a poem composed a few miles above Tintern Abbey. Connect the landscape to the quiet of the sky. How sublime, how wonderful. And indeed we do that, and we get in touch with something more along the lines of just the sheer joy of being alive in the world and experiencing the beauty of everything, the complexity of everything, the interminable mystery, and what's this? He says, all this unintelligible world is lightened. The weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened. I think a lot of us go around with this sense that we need to try and intuit and make intelligible the entire world, or that we need to not be merely men and women of learning, but that we should know everything. We should know everything that there is to be known. And what a foolish pursuit that is. And we beat ourselves over the head, I think, if we ever come across our own ignorance at times and realize that we don't know everything. And the ego receives quite a shock when it realizes that it doesn't know everything. And stepping away from all those things, the grind and the mania of everyday life, the mad rush in cities to be the best, to be the most successful, to be earning the most money, to be doing all these different things, is lightened in moments of pure serenity, when we're just purely in contact with the natural world or deeply invested in a creative pursuit. And the creative pursuit, that is your life. That was Wordsworth's life. That's how he orientated himself in the world. He was purely a poet, and his purpose, was this divine gift that he had to foster within himself, this gift to write beautiful, extraordinary poetry. And indeed, we can foster things like that in our own life and gain the satisfaction that comes from having those pursuits and the deep power of joy. And we can experience these things, and we can really be in touch with joy in life. And joy is a truly potent force. It's a higher, and I think more pristine and nobler form of happiness than mere pleasure. We gain pleasure from all sorts of things. We gain pleasure from alcohol, from gambling, drugs, this, that, and the other. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. There's nothing wrong with drinking alcohol and having a little bit of drugs here and there. There's nothing wrong with having a little bit of flutter on gambling or something, or having sex or anything like that. These are pleasurable things. But I mean, any kind of pleasurable thing can get out of hand, can't it? We can snort too much cocaine and become an addict. We can become a sex addict. We can become a gambling addict, and so on and so forth. And the pleasure there can kind of ruin itself, and we can get locked into states of abjection and misery as a result of, going too far with something and ignoring as a consequence higher things that are available in life. So, really, I didn't want this to be a video about advice. I wanted this to be a video of exposition, more like, and a video of, maybe it is a video of advice, or a video of instruction for anyone who wants to listen to it. However well I'm articulating what I'm trying to say, I don't know how well that is. But nonetheless, yeah, being moved by art, that's a zone in which we come into contact with higher forms of pleasure, or more like joy. That's when we really come across joy, I think, when we're moved by painting, poetry, music, these sorts of things. And I have to say, and you can also drink and say have a few beers to yourself of an evening and just sit back and listen to music and have a wonderful time and do this sort of thing, which is something I actually haven't done for a very long time. I can't remember the last time I just sat back of an evening and listened to my favourite songs, and that gives me joy. Listening to these great works of art, these great masterpieces that I love, and just disconnecting from reality possibly a little bit, and swooning in the presence of great artists, or going out in nature. That's a very big one, particularly for me, looking up to the moon and the stars and feeling wonder, awe, inspiration, but also joy. And joy is very, very important in life, I think. And it's something that we don't put so much emphasis on. It's something that we don't focus on enough, I don't think. We don't focus on truly joyful experiences and trying to magnify these things in our lives and trying to make the share of our life that is joyful greater. Because I think when it comes to living a joyful life, I think that can be done. But the emphasis is always on happiness. And happiness, you can get plastic happiness. You can have states of bliss, for instance, where you're like a heroin addict and you're injecting yourself with heroin, and that'll give you a state of bliss, which I suppose is a sort of happiness. It's a kind of happy state, most certainly, but the detrimental effects of that are so incredibly great that it will most certainly rob you of joy. And I think all too often the joyful moments in our lives are so fleeting and so rare almost, and we kind of evade them, or through no fault of our own we evade them, or don't, or aren't receptive enough to them, aren't open enough to feelings such as that. And we think we're trapped in patterns of thinking whereby we're thinking, we're worried or anxious, we need this, that, and the other in order to be happy or happy. And too often it's like money and status and women and these sorts of things, which, yeah, might make you happy for a little bit, but ultimately I don't think necessarily put you in touch with the deep power of joy. And that's something that we're unfortunately too often missing in our lives, something that kind of goes over our heads too much. Perhaps it's too much of a high and sophisticated thing for a lot of people, or too hard to intuit. Because in my experience, at least anyway, the feelings of pure joy go along with refinement and uh, things like reading poetry, appreciating art, music, literature, great things, and we have joy associated with that. But then there's also very human things that we all must appreciate, surely, such as walking in nature, just enjoying the natural world, and looking up at the heavens, the stars, and so on, and experiencing the night sky and all that sort of thing. And but I think a certain sort of person, dare I say, the sort of person who tries to model themselves on Andrew Tate or someone like this, is going to sniff at the deep power of joy, I think, and focus more on money, materialism, accumulating material wealth, and getting banging women, and all this sort of thing, and will become hedonistic and pleasure seeking, and they have a pleasure dominated and egoistic mind, as opposed to a refined, contemplative, sager, wiser, um, less cluttered, less anxious, less neurotic, more placid mode of being, wherein you can experience joy truly. Because joy, in addition to it being a high and refined and sophisticated form of pleasure, I think, or form of happiness, I think it should be it is fleeting. It is fleeting. If we're not open to it, if we haven't achieved a state whereby we can just be relaxed and blissful and joyful, unless we've learned how to control our own minds to some extent, we can't really come in touch with that. We can't really get in contact with it unless we put the legwork in to control our own thinking. And perhaps meditative practices go along very much with this as well. A kind of mindfulness state is what you more like need to be in, or a kind of more like a meditative state where you're sitting very deliberately and very carefully, not necessarily controlling your breath, but noticing everything around you and trying to filter out all distractions that come inwardly from your own mind. And then you can be more joyful in life. And then joy comes along, in those kind of like almost hypnotic trance-like states that one can put oneself into if one has a mind to, and experience the deep power of joy. I love that line so much because it expresses something that is so abundantly the case about joy. It is deeply powerful. It's deeply moving to experience joy in life. And it reorientates you. If you have the openness to be able to confront that power of joy, if you have that within you to be able to do that, then it can reorientate your entire life around those sorts of things, those higher, nobler, less materialistic, less self-centered forms of pleasure. And I've experienced a lot of joy in my own life. And the power of joy itself causes one to reflect on those things and reflect on the amount of joy I've experienced in my life. And I've experienced a lot of joy in my life. A lot of times I've been purely joyful, just relaxed, open, happy, experiencing nature and just sitting in awe of the natural world or something and appreciating it all. And yeah, that's when joy comes over you. and for having read the I Ching this morning, this little fortune telling ritual. Whether or not it predicts the future, I don't know if it does or doesn't. It probably doesn't, let's face it, if we're being rational about this, but without the need to rationalize everything away. Within kind of all these mystical or occult practices that we have, I think that we also have an access over things like joy, if for no other reason than the I Ching simply reminded me that joy existed in the morning, and it reminded me that I can cultivate the sort of gentleness and something else that goes along with that. I think faith might be a good word, since it kind of is like that. You need to have faith in oneself and faith in the natural world, that things like joy exist within it. And then you can be joyful, and then you can experience joy, which is a really profound, it's a profound form of happiness to experience. And it's not just merely being happy, like a lot of the time I'm pretty miserable and depressed actually, but I mean, a lot of the time I'm happy as well, whether or not I show it on the surface, or I'm at a kind of a stage of basic happiness, and I'm not in a kind of a joyful state necessarily. I'm not joyous, but happy a lot of the time. And I think that the existence and power of joy is to remind us that beyond mere basic entry-level happiness or common or garden happiness, there are higher stages yet that may be reached, and higher accesses at things such as pleasure and joy and these things that go along with that. And that pleasure, happiness may be a more refined and sophisticated thing than, say, merely getting drunk. Though getting drunk, you can be joyful while you're drunk, actually. You can be joyful listening to great music while you're drunk, and just having a few beers to yourself and sitting around listening to your favorite songs. That's absolutely something that's possible. It most certainly is. Be joyful while you're gambling or having sex, I guess. If you're having sex with the ideal woman for you, right, I'm sure that'll encourage you to be joyful. If you really have met the one and you're doing it for the first time, I guess that's, a state in which you can experience joy. But yeah, it's kind of like the stuff we know already. We have to figure out ways of getting out of these bamboozling tracts of anxiety, depression, loneliness, fixation on money, material wealth, fixations on unhealthy forms of pleasure and addiction, and ideally, not being an addict, not being a heroin addict, for instance, no matter how much pleasure heroin might give you. But I'm not doing anything that's going to endanger your chances at true joyful existence too greatly. And I think it was a great thing to wake up and do the I Ching this morning and have that come up in a reading, because it's always lovely when something good comes up in a reading and it's not ruin or something like this, and it's not a horrible, one of the worst hexagrams of the I Ching that you can get. It's always nice when you get something like joyousness. And yeah, we can foster that in our lives. We truly can. We can cultivate it. We can encourage ourselves to be just incrementally more joyful each and every day. And I think it goes along with things like being more relaxed, calmer, happier, less stressed, less anxious, and just finding little ways in which we can just snatch a bit of joy for ourselves each and every day, and make those periods in our days when we snatch true joy a bit more frequent, and try to increase that in our own lives, and try to make other people joyful as well, because that will make you joyful in turn. So it's a win-win situation. Smile at people, ask the girl behind the counter at the checkout how her day is, and so on and so forth. If she's looking miserable, try and cheer her up somehow. Smile at people. That's very important. And yeah, we can do all sorts of things to appreciate the true power of joy and to magnify its awesome power within our own lives. And I think I've roughly made the point I want to make in this now 20-minute video. But oh well, I've said what I want to say, I think. Thank you very much, everybody. I love you lots. See you soon.